One of the most influential social movements affecting the past and present African American population is that of urban renewal. Physically moving families, businesses, and in turn lives transforms communities of people in a plethora of different ways. Louisville serves as an example of the alterations urban renewal and public housing efforts cause in the populace. The heavy-handed implementation of these projects negatively affected the urban landscape for Black Louisvillians, particularly in the downtown district of Walnut Street. The first stirrings of the public housing movement were felt in the 1930s with the construction of two main complexes in Louisville. The College Court complex was reserved for African Americans, while LaSalle Place was reserved for whites. Two other complexes, Beecher Terrace and Clarksdale, were completed by 1940. Desegregation did not until 1956, when 12 African Americans fought and won the right to live in traditionally white public housing complexes. De facto segregation persisted, but steps such as the full integration of Iroquois homes marked meaningful shifts in the distribution of housing in Louisville. Urban renewal, begun in 1959, would occur in two stages. These involved the West Downtown Renewal Area, which included 316 acres bordered by Broadway, 6th, 15th, and Market Streets. Over 1,500 housing units were constructed, as well as various office buildings and commercial sites. This is the project which obliterated Walnut Street, one of the lead cultural districts in African American Louisville for the first half of the 20th century. In a city of often arbitrary racial segregation, the need for a support network for African Americans was an explicit necessity. Goldie Winstead Beckett lived for 26 years in Louisville with her husband William Washington Beckett. William was the owner of a funeral home at 11th and Walnut. In an oral history conducted by the University of Louisville, Goldie describes life on Walnut Street. Well, they were the happiest days of my life on Walnut Street because people respected us, and they looked after us, and they washed my children. It was a very active street. There were many small businesses owned by Negroes, and Walnut Street was sort of like a haven. So I thought that in those days we made more progress than we are making now because we had so many more businesses. Goldie likens Walnut Street to a Louisville Harlem, a place where the community could feel safe. It was just a lot of people doing what they wanted to do, she says, and they would work, and in the evenings they were ready to just socialize and be free. Urban renewal forced an end to this community, at least in the logistical sense. In the early 1960s, the business district was replaced by government buildings, new roadways, and public housing complexes. Goldie and her husband were some of the last to leave Walnut Street, forced out by decreased business and relocation. Frank Mormon, owner of one of the oldest black-owned businesses in Louisville, found his own business suffering due to the city's renewal projects. Mormon's service station had been a staple of Walnut Street since its opening in 1937. Although left physically untouched by urban renewal, the economic downturn, numerous construction projects causing logistical difficulties for the station, and the absence of a solid community of customers contributed to its closure in 1973. The attitudes towards public housing have changed over the years. The drastic movements focused on slum clearance, resulting in poor construction, emphasis on high-rises, and the relocation and or destruction of historically black neighborhoods exacerbated tensions. Another problem, which affects the River City, is the idea of private ownership of publicly subsidized houses. This means that the complexes are owned by individuals, but are funded by the city, leaving opportunity for corruption and personal profit in an area which should be focused on social equality. The more ethereal effects of public housing involve the ethos that has emerged around the issue in the American psyche. When you mention the phrase public housing or the word projects, a certain picture forms in your head. This picture often depicts an inner-city area full of drab cookie-cutter high-rises or row houses, places where crime and decay are a reality of daily life. The racial component simply makes this ignominy more pronounced. Rather than providing a socially acceptable area for low-income families and individuals to live and thrive, the placement and construction of public housing in the early to mid-20th century drove divisions among classes and cultures for decades. The simplified purpose of urban renewal is to utilize urban land to its full potential in a way that revitalizes and sustains the city proper. The motivations behind the movement were less than admirable. The chief influence in the plan for Louisville was a report published in 1932 by Harland Bartholomew, a leading city planner, entitled The Negro Housing Problem in Louisville. There are a number of obstacles that are fundamental to any scheme for improving housing conditions among Negroes, it says. These include a lack of desire among a large portion of the population for something better than they are accustomed to. If it were possible to create among the Negro masses a real desire for decent accommodations, the slums would automatically eliminate themselves. The ramifications of this report would be felt swiftly and brutally in the following year's events. The construction of segregated housing complexes began, and the destruction of the Walnut Street Business District became an inevitability. While many civic leaders balked at the obvious inhumane treatment of residents in exchange for economic benefit, the city not only accepted Bartholomew's ideas, but asked him back in 1957 for a revised plan. By 1962, much of the downtown area was unrecognizable, with only a few historic structures remaining. The city has made attempts to recover from this particularly alienating period in its past. Many are skeptical at the effectiveness of these efforts, however, and are rightfully wary of government interference in any aspect of what can be racially charged issues. Creating the American dream is an idea constantly in flux, but the facet of the right to property is a constant. With such a vital part of the daily lives of citizens in question, it was inevitable that bigotry and economic convenience would leak into legislation in the 20th century. The movements flooded into one another, public housing influencing urban renewal and vice versa. They both played a vital role in forming the public's opinion on subsidized housing and, in a broader sense, the American inner city. The destruction of districts such as Walnut Street serve as a warning to future legislatures to be mindful of the integrity of communities which must be protected by officials, not betrayed by them.